This was the first passage in the mock. It had 4 questions. The passage talked about how there are certain vaccine programs which are largely ineffective, but even to the point of harming or damaging the health of the children who take these vaccines. But then, just to keep the river of gold flowing, as he puts it in the passage, there are multinational companies and their PR firms which create their public image, who keep this let's say scam running, just in order to, let's say, keep their coffers filled, keep their pockets filled. And this is something that eventually leads to the author questioning the fact that why does this happen? How can we trust the same people that we entrust our lives or in their hands, right? And so he begins to speak about these two parts to a human personality, or a human, that is, we have a good side, one which is altruistic and sympathetic and spiritual and generous, and then we have a side which is all about evil, right? And finally, we get to know that he's eventually actually talking about, on the whole, about a book called The Sanctity of Human Blood, which is not an anti-vaccine textbook, as he says, but he says that it delves into a lot many more issues, right? So let's turn to question number 55, which was the first question in this passage. It reads, which of the following questions is closest to or most similar to the author's thoughts in the passage? Now, what we are trying to find out is, it's a further application question, as is clear. Yet we are trying to find out what might probably have been another question, since the passage contains a lot of rhetorical questions. What might have been another question that he might have asked in the passage, right? So we know that whatever be the answer, it has to be, or it has to go closely with the thoughts already present, right? Or he might want something that he might want to delve with, not something that he has already discussed. So this line of thought will help us to eliminate from the options. Let's read through the options now. A says, how inane can we be to hand over the reins of our lives to wolves in sheep's clothing? Now, if we come to this part of the passage right over here where I'm marking, it says, what we seem to have forgotten today is that we don't need anyone's permission to live our lives. So what he's trying to say, the author is trying to say, is that we don't need anyone's permission to live our lives. We can take our own decisions, right? And then he continues forward here through the use of a rhetorical question. He says, the defense of a child's bloodstream resides with the parent. It's the parent who needs to decide which vaccine to use or not to use. And this is the question in question here, I should say. What can we expect from a body of legislators controlled by the biggest of the special interest lobbies, right? So what he's trying to say is, there are legislators who are controlled by special interest lobbies. What they try to do is keep these vaccines in the market and keep earning from them. And so we cannot really rely on such people for sound judgment, right, about what is to be injected into the very delicate and sensitive medium, which is the human circulatory system, into our blood. And this is what leads us to believe that this particular option in the question might be the answer, where it says, how stupid can we be, or how ignorant might we be if we hand over the reins of our lives. You might connect this to that statement again in the passage where he says that we don't need anyone's permission to live our lives, right? So we might keep this as an option, and let's move on then, consider the other ones also. It says, the second one says, why does the demonic half of human nature triumph over its angelic half? Now he does go into discussing why the demonic half, that there is a demonic half, and then that there is an angelic half also. But would he really want to go delve into why the demonic half takes over the angelic half? No, he does not. He just mentions it, that is the reason why such things exist, that people, just for the sake of money, they might want to harm other or even innocent infants for that matter. So we can safely eliminate that option. C says, how should we impede the infestation of our minds by PR parasites? Right in the first paragraph of the passage, he talks about PR firms being like parasites and trying to invade our minds, infesting our minds, trying to create a good image of such multinational companies, but then eventually they are really hollow, right? So does he want to discuss why we should or how we should stop this infestation? No, he just says, he just lays that as the basis for the entire passage, the rest of the passage. In the first paragraph itself, he lays the basis by saying that PR companies create this image about multinational companies, but then, as he says, starts off in the second paragraph, this is the reality, right? So we can eliminate that option too. D says, are there measures that can be taken to resurrect humanity's conscience and ward off evil from the world? Again, this might seem close, but we are not talking of warding off evil. Evil was only talked in connection to when he says that humans have two parts. One is a good part, right, a benevolent part, and one is full of evil. And this, he says, the evil part is what leads to all these things, right? So he's just trying to go into the cause of why all these things are happening. He does not want to talk about measures to resurrect humanity's conscience. And so we know that we can cancel out D, and our answer for this question has to be option A. Moving on to the second question, the question reads, which of the following options can be inferred from the passage? Now, A says, it is easy to propagate malice under the garb of goodness. Let's go back to that part in the paragraph when he speaks about purveyors of sickness and death, right? Right here in the second paragraph, in the middle over here on the page. It says, hardly these people are often gracious with social aplomb. They have perfected the packaging of sickness, degeneration and death by wrapping it in hope, health, youth and vitality. So he does say that it's a crafted illusion, as does our option 2. It says that they propagate malice under the garb of goodness. Yes, that happens. But does he say that it is easy to do so? No. We eliminate option A. It would be questionable on a parent's part to trust doctors, really. Is he talking about doctors? No. I take you back to the passage where he speaks about legislators, right? He says that these legislators cannot be, see, I had marked it here already, and this is where he says that legislators cannot be trusted, and so we cannot rely on them, not on doctors, right? He doesn't speak about distrusting doctors, so we can eliminate B2. C says the entire rigmarole to control the opinions of the masses is aimed at profit. Before we go on to this, because this is the answer, let's try and eliminate D, since D says refuting the existence of evil. Now pay attention to this word. He doesn't talk about refuting the existence of evil. He says that turning away from identifying malevolence or evil in the world is assumes its triumph, right? That's what he says. So what he's trying to say, basically, he's talking of turning away from identifying that there already is evil, but I don't want to identify it. Refuting would mean that I completely or absolutely deny the existence of evil. That is not what he has referred to, and so we know that C is the answer. How can we support C through the passage? It's right here in the first paragraph. C, it says sophisticated PR firms who are their clients, multinational companies, right, who build civilizations. And what have they done it for? This is it, that they have companies with money, right? He says enough money for 5 years. He says enough money to do a lot of other things. And then why does he say all this happens? He says that it's because they want to keep the river of gold flowing. That is, they want to make a lot of money, and this is the reason why they do all this, right? So this particular option is the correct one, C. The entire rigmarole to control the opinion of the masses by PR firms or through PR firms is aimed at profit. Once you've read the passage very carefully, it's very easy to figure out the tone of the passage. It cannot be meditative, right? Since meditative means trying to think deeply, or that you're being very thoughtful of a particular thought pattern. No. So we know that it cannot be meditative. He doesn't go into very deep thoughts about a certain point. What about antagonistic? This might seem to be the answer, but then it's good to know that antagonistic means hostile, right? Completely hostile or aggressive. Is he being aggressive in the passage? No, right? We can eliminate this option because he's not being hostile or aggressive through his tone. What he's showing is contempt. I already used that word earlier when I was explaining what the passage is all about, but then this is what the fact is, that he's trying to show his absolute dislike, I should say, right, for or extreme dislike for the entire topic, which was that legislators and PR companies and multinationals, they just for the sake of filling their pockets, they are ready to harm people to a great extent. So we know that the answer to this question has to be contempt, right? That it's a contemptuous tone that he has adopted. What does ebullient mean? If you knew the meaning of ebullient, you would have straight away eliminated it, since it means cheerful, right? So we know that the answer for this question has to be option C. This was one of the really good questions that I have seen in recent times. It says, the author uses which of the following techniques to present the passage to the readers? You really had to read the passage well. You had to know the outlay of the passage, the outline of the passage, in order to answer this particular question. Let's try and form a map of the question so far that we have read the passage now, or you might have read it, and let's figure out which one of these is the actual techniques that he uses, right? So in the first paragraph, if you might have noticed, right in the first paragraph, he comes up with the theme of the main idea of the entire passage. He is wanting to talk about multinational companies who have been involved in the global pollution by drug and chemicals for the past 2 centuries, right? This is what these companies have done, right? Then he also talks about how such companies are so insensitive, and he talks about a larger question, right? There is a much larger question, which is that, that man has an enormous capacity for evil, and this is what leads to this entire thing about the companies being involved. What he does further is he brings up rhetorical questions. For example, right in this paragraph here, he brings up a lot of questions here. Even further ahead in this particular question, he connects the point of evil to what is happening right now, to the point of vaccines, and then he concludes, in this particular paragraph. So what we have is, we have the main idea, the statements, right? We have assertive statements that he makes throughout the passage to further his claim. We have rhetorical questions, right? We have rhetoric that he uses to support his points, and then that is what leads us to a conclusion, right? So once we have this, let's try and figure out from the questions now, from the options now, I mean. See, A says he employs searing questions to address a specific necessity. For one thing, it's not a necessity, and reiterates the point by drawing a final conclusion. Is this the answer? No. He does draw a final conclusion, but there is no mention of a specific necessity, and also he does employ questions, but then this is what leads us to eliminate option A. Option B says he focuses the reader's attention on assertive statements. Yes, we had assertive statements in the passage. We had rhetorical questions addressed towards strengthening a cause. Which cause? The cause about multinational companies being evil, and that he mentions at the outset of the passage. Yes, that is what he does, B being the answer. Let's eliminate C and D though. He jumbles up fact with authoritative judgment calls. Does he take judgment calls? No, he does not. He doesn't say we should not do this, we should not do this. What he does instead is he raises a lot of questions. We eliminate C. He disregards popular notion. Clearly we can eliminate D also. So we have B as the answer to this